I love bread and I hate when food goes to waste. So today I'll share two of my favorite recipes that use up leftover bread. In modern society, we've gotten quite used to wastefulness, and according to WWF, about 40% of the global food production goes to waste. There is waste at every level of the supply chain, and political measures are definitely needed to improve global food systems. But where we as consumers can make a difference is in the last stage by making sure that the food we buy actually is eaten.
And here we can take inspiration from peasant societies where food was a lot more scarce and people thus figured out ways to use up everything. In the Italian region of Tuscany, we find two amazing recipes that come from this mantra of not letting bread go to waste: Panzanella and Pappa al Pomodoro. Panzanella is a bread salad and is one of my favorite things in the entire world. It consists mainly of bread and tomatoes that marinate in a vinegar-based dressing. To make it, start by finely dicing a shallot and add it to a bowl. Then give it a couple of tablespoons of white wine vinegar and let the onions marinate while you chop your tomatoes. Cut the cherry tomatoes in half and add them to the onions along with a good pinch of salt and a tablespoon of sugar. The salt and the sugar will intensify the tomato flavor and balance out the acidity from the vinegar. They are also going to extract a lot of juice from the tomatoes, which is important for the rehydration of the stale bread. I also add a little bit of olive oil and then let the tomatoes sit for about 15 minutes. While that is happening, we can make our croutons. Traditionally, you wouldn't toast the bread for panzanella, you would just let the stale bread sit in the marinade until it is rehydrated, but it gets infinitely better both in terms of texture and flavor if you toast the bread first. So cut it into some nice chunks and add it to a pan with some olive oil and salt. Then toast them on a medium heat until they are crispy and golden brown, and try to avoid burning them as it will leave a bitter taste in your panzanella. Your tomatoes should now have released a lot of their juice, creating a lovely marinade for the crouton. If you have fresh basil, it adds a nice perfumey layer to the dish, but it's not strictly necessary. And then you can add your bread and stir it up. Make sure you toss your salad very well, as you don't want to leave any dry spots, and then let it sit for 15 minutes so that the bread can suck up the tomato juices. After those 15 minutes, you'll want to taste for seasoning and add more salt, sugar, vinegar or olive oil depending on how you like it. Serve it up as a light lunch, as a side dish, or as part of a tapas mese spread, and I promise you, you will love it. It is the perfect combination of exciting flavors and textures. Panzanella is best in the summer when tomatoes are in season, but for a more wintry dish we can make a Pappa al Pomodoro. This is not quite as extraordinary as panzanella, but it is a nice way of using up your stale bread and is a cheap and easy alternative to pasta or gnocchi. It is basically just bread cooked in tomato sauce until you reach a soupy or porridgey texture. You can use fresh tomatoes, you could use canned tomatoes, you could use both. It doesn't really matter as long as it makes a sauce. I start by toasting the bread, and again, this is not very traditional, but I think it adds a nice extra layer of flavor to the dish. While it is toasting, I chop up some tomatoes and a lot of garlic. I like a lot of olive oil in my tomato sauce as it adds both to the flavor and the texture in the end. And then I fry my garlic on a medium heat until I start getting the slightest browning around the edges. Before it gets too brown, I then add a pinch of chili flakes and my fresh tomatoes. Cook this down and add salt, pepper, and whatever herbs you like. And when the tomatoes have almost melted, I add a can of peeled tomatoes, break them up a little bit, and then a little bit of water. Put on a lid and let it simmer for 20 minutes, and bangarang, 20 minutes later we have a sauce. It is a little hard to see on the video, but because I used plenty of olive oil, the sauce is almost emulsified and has a creaminess to it that I really like. Add the toasted bread chunks and let them cook for a few minutes. And depending on what kind of bread you use, you will see quite different results. I used a mixture of ciabatta and sourdough, and the ciabatta cooks out completely and becomes part of the sauce, whereas the sourdough kind of holds its shape a little bit more and stays chunky, kind of like a weird gnocchi. Season with salt and pepper, and optionally some parmigiano, and if you have used a very sour sourdough bread, you might also consider adding a little bit of sugar to balance it out. Et voilà! Pappa al Pomodoro, probably not a meal that will change your life, but a solid peasant meal that uses up your leftovers and presents you with a delicious and new set of flavors and textures. Buon appetito!